How's it going guys, Kris here with another Battlefield 5 gun guide for you today, and in this one we're going to be checking out a Norwegian bolt action rifle, the Krag Jorgensen, a weapon you'll be able to unlock at recon rank 13. So the Krag Jorgensen is definitely one of the earliest guns you'll be able to find in Battlefield 5, with its production dating back to the late 1800s. It was designed by two guys, Ole Krag and Erik Jorgensen, hence where it gets its name from, initially for the Danish and Norwegian armed forces, and it was done so to replace some of the even older rifles that functioned using tubular magazines. The new Krag rifles had an updated design, using a funky looking capsule magazine instead, wrapping around the gun's bolt to try and improve the weapon's balance and centre of gravity when in use. This meant that it had to be loaded from the side as opposed to the top, like a lot of the other bolt action rifles, and because it didn't use a conventional box magazine either to store its rounds, this meant that you could only load one bullet at a time, which was albeit easier and quicker to do down to that capsule magazine, but it did prohibit the use of stripper clips, which came along after the rifle's inception. The Krag was made in a pretty wide variety of models over the decades of its production, with many full-length and shortened carbine variants for the Danes, the Norwegians, and even the Americans, all with their own modifications and calibers to suit the needs of the armies using it. The Americans later ditched the Krags in favour of the M1903, but both Norway and Denmark still went on to deploy the rifle series throughout World War II, after over 50 years of circulation. So moving over to the in-game stats, the Krag Jorgensen dishes out its damage fairly consistently across the board, dealing a flat value of 60 over all ranges for body shots. This is surely on the lower side compared to a lot of the other bolt action rifles, with it not having any extra power within shorter sightlines, unlike most of the others, but it's still a reasonable amount nevertheless, basically equating to the same 2-hit kill over all ranges. This damage profile just means that it probably won't be quite as effective for finishing off enemies who have already taken some damage first. But on the other hand, if you aim for the head, they're going to go down every time with no questions asked. So the Krag's damage might generally be lower than average, but it's still a very deadly weapon, which is going to perform in a predictable way as you use it, though headshots are going to be your best friend most of the time. Fire rate isn't particularly anything to get excited about, being set at 54 RPM, slightly below average, though providing you're not playing too aggressively, this should be fine for most snipe-offs and battles with other players beyond medium range. Though if you do want to give it a bit more of a jolt, you could always boost the fire rate to 64 RPM with the machine bolt spec, helping to decrease those 2-shot kill times slightly, thus making the gun a little bit more competitive, with that rate of fire now matching the Ross Mark III's base figure. Accuracy is the next topic, and the gun's got a standard horizontal recoil value of 0.1 for both sides, with a vertical value of 2.5, affecting its upwards kick. Not that this really means a great deal, with it being a bolt action rifle, as you're gonna have to unscope to cycle the bolt anyway in between shots, sort of rendering the recoil pattern less meaningful most of the time. Though these values are at least on the lower side, giving you a clearer view of your targets if you stay scoped in and want to track their movements. The big thing to highlight in this section, however, is the Krag's higher than average muzzle velocity, which is a much more important factor to consider when choosing a rifle, affecting its usefulness over longer distances. It's got a bullet speed of 900 meters per second, so the same as the Kar98K, which is actually a great speed for a bolt action to have, because it's going to make it more effective against players over longer ranges, with its bullets flying faster through the air and landing where they need to be slightly sooner. But that's not the only trick the Krag's got up its sleeve for long range sniping, because it's one of the few weapons in the game to have access to the low drag round specialization, helping to flatten out your bullet's flight trajectory, making it slightly easier to use when lining up those cross map headshots. Now, because the Krag Jorgensen uses a capsule magazine, things are going to play out a little bit differently to other bolt action rifles regarding the way it handles ammunition. The gun actually holds an extra cartridge than a lot of the others, having a capacity of 6 rounds, and this gives it the ability to take down at least 3 enemies per mag, providing all of those shots connect with other players, that is. But with it using that unconventional feed system, it's not going to be able to use stripper clips, meaning all of its bullets are going to need to be reloaded manually one by one, and empty reloads therefore can't be sped up like with other rifles. Thankfully for the Krag, having that capsule magazine does happen to shave off a little bit of time when it comes to tactical reloads, as it's only going to take between 2.5 to 4 seconds to load up to 5 rounds, whenever you hit the reload button. But that extra 6th bullet extends this time to about 6 seconds, giving the gun a fairly slow reload when it's all out of shots, basically taking an extra 2 seconds to slot that final bullet in the chamber. so tactical reloads are fast, empties not so much. And because there's no way to speed these times up through specializations, it's best being a bit aware of your ammo count while you play, often seeking out cover after you fire off the gun's last shot. Anyway, onto those specializations. Both sides of the gun's spectrum are mainly optimised for certain playstyles, with the left side suiting slightly more aggressive play, and the right side catering more to long range sniping. But first you'll be met with quick aim and slings and swivels at the top. I'd probably opt for quick aim, just so you can get down the gun sights a tad faster, which can be handy considering follow-up shots are often required to kill a lot of targets, though slings and swivels can still be useful for switching to your gadgets and sidearm faster, so both decent choices. In the middle section, on the left, we've got the custom stock and machine bolt specs, speeding up that fire rate and improving spread while moving around. The right side, which I generally prefer, is a bit more useful for hitting players in the distance and going for those long range headshots. And because the Krag's got a lot of stats to benefit sniping from far away, the variable zeroing and low drag rounds seems like a pretty good fit for the weapon, playing to its strengths a little bit more than the other side. Last of all, at the bottom of the spec tree, you're going to find the bayonet and bipod options. Bipod will once again benefit long range use, though only when you're prone or leaning on a ledge, and if you didn't opt for slings and swivels earlier on to speed up sidearm deployment, then you might want to equip the bayonet instead, which might be a bit more useful against enemies who decide to pop up nearby unexpectedly, giving you a bit of extra backup for close range encounters. So in conclusion, the Krag Jorgensen is a pretty interesting weapon with a few strong factors to set itself apart from quite a lot of the other bolt action rifles. It's got the weakest damage output across the board, which doesn't drop off or change over its bullet's flight, making damage consistent but a bit lackluster within those earlier ranges. Fire rate isn't particularly brilliant either, though at least the gun's always going to kill its targets in 2 shots at most, whatever the range. But the Krag is definitely a weapon designed for hitting off those helmets, with headshots not only killing your opponents outright, but also being easier to land over distance than some of the other rifles, due to the gun's ballistics. That higher bullet speed is going to improve the gun's range performance, and with some of its specializations also giving it a slight advantage here too. I guess you could say that the Krag's stats are mainly optimised for sniping, and engaging targets over a longer distance, rather than up close, with it being a more defensive weapon in general. Having those unique reloads gives the rifle even more distinction, which will probably be a nice aspect for players who prefer to do tactical reloads, refilling the gun's magazine in between fights, with individual bullets being faster to slot in than normal. And overall, if you're an accurate player that prefers to engage enemies over longer distances, then the Krag Jorgensen just might be the gun for you, performing more effectively at range, while generally being a bit less useful for aggressive play against enemies nearby. So that's all I've got for you this time around, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video and learned a few things along the way. Give me a like if you did, and subscribe for more content on my channel, all new and upcoming. Take it easy, and I'll be seeing you in our next one.